I did Katya at the Wexford Festival. And actually that was a funny story because I had already been boring the guy who was running the Wexford Festival. I had worked there as a stage manager the year before. And I had been already boring him, saying, you have to do Janáček, we should do Janáček, blah, blah, blah. I received a letter from the Wexford Festival saying, would I like to do a production? And it said, would you like to direct Bellini's Il Pirata? And I thought, well, of course I'm a young director, I have to say yes, whatever, you can't say no. But it was not really my thing. So, okay. And so then 3 weeks later I got another letter saying, dear David, I'm very sorry, I hope you don't mind, but somebody else who's coming to work for the festival really wants to direct Il Pirata by Bellini, and would you mind if instead you did Katya Kabanova? So I don't know whether they were making a joke of this, I'm not sure, but it seemed like an incredible twist of fate. Well, I think the group of pieces that I call cinematic collages are very interesting for a stage director because he moves through these pieces with the speed of a cinema editor. So he cuts from one idea to the next idea, and from one scene to the next scene. And this is complicated to do on the stage because, on the stage you have sort of things to move around or, whatever, you have to shift things that you can't cut like you can in a film. So conceptually they're quite challenging and interesting for a director. From the House of the Dead is just all these different people telling these stories. In a way, there is no story. You have to find the story or invent the pattern or create the world in which it takes place. But it's not a linear story. There is a kind of story or a cycle anyway in The Cunning Little Vixen, but there's so many different little scenes to be slotted into that cycle. And that requires an inventive use of theatre space to be able to accommodate this very rapid, cross-cutting technique. The other pieces like Yennefer and Macropolis and Katya are in that sense easier to stage because they're much more kind of straightforward. Although, as we talked about the other day, all of those pieces have this quality that at the end of the piece, Janáček does something which kind of blows the walls of the theatre apart, and it goes off into a kind of universal apotheosis about the situation, not directly about the situation, but about life and the philosophy of the story or whatever. And that's sometimes a challenge for a director to follow that, to find a way of, anyway, not inhibiting the audience in this moment from experiencing this kind of very generous transformation of the story into something much broader, more universal, more apocalyptic, really. I think it's that the pieces are incredibly direct, that they're telling very, very powerful stories in a very direct, visceral way. So there is no kind of convention. Like you have in earlier operas where you have arias and choruses and ensembles, there's a certain kind of sort of formal convention going on. In these pieces, you just follow the drama. The music follows the drama, and it just directly expresses the drama. So there's no elaborate, complicated structure around it. It's just focusing on that. And so, in a way, they are like watching really good films. You're not bothered by any kind of convention or pattern that you have to understand. They just tell the story, and they're very immediate, I think, and very humane. pieces. You know, Janáček he's not sentimental. I mean, he doesn't exploit these kind of emotional moments in the way that Puccini does. I mean, the brilliant interlude and scene that follows the death of the vixen, you know, where he just allows a kind of extraordinary stillness to take over after the firing of this shot. And then he goes into this incredibly touching scene, the last inn scene in which the schoolmaster is sitting there all on his own, and he's realized that this mysterious woman, Terinka, doesn't really exist or has stopped existing, and that, you know, he's just left on his own. I mean, it's exquisitely controlled piece of writing, without being in any way indulgent. So as you say, if you're really concentrating and paying attention, then you can be very moved by this scene. But if you want somebody to come at you with arm on the sleeve, you know, heart on the sleeve, grandstanding emotion, that he doesn't give you that. Yennefer and Katya and Makropoulos are constructed like what I would call in English a well-made play. I mean, they're linear stories with three acts, a beginning, a middle, an end. It's a very clear narrative structure. And the other pieces, Osud, Broček, Vixen, House of the Dead, are constructed like collages. So they're not linear storytelling. They're made up of juxtapositions of ideas and scenes, and I mean, perhaps the most complex is The Cunning Little Vixen, which is, to my mind, the most perfect piece of modernist dramaturgy, because it's such a brilliant assembly of all different possibilities of operatic expression. You know, he knows exactly how to use dance. He knows exactly how to use orchestral interlude to tell a certain part of the story. He knows how to use a song, you know, a specific song appears at a certain point, to know how to use wordless music. And the amazing thing is that he did all of that out of nowhere, really. I mean, there was no model for this. Through Broček, the effeminate artistic world of the moon is satirized, and the ridiculously dogmatic, fanatical world of the religious fundamentalists and the medieval world is satirized, but at the same time Broček himself is satirized. So it's a double satire. So the person, usually in a satire you have a kind of Mr. Everyman through whom you see that the world is absurd. But in this piece, you see the world is absurd, but you see he's absurd as well. So so there's no center. Well, I think one is constantly amazed by the original gestures of his music, that even 100 years later, his music is still strikingly original and arresting. You're sort of surprised, even when you know it really well. And that it has this amazing energy, this real kind of visceral energy. I'm thinking of that, in the love scene in Katya, this phrase, daram bam. This to me is Janáček. This is this terrific kind of rush of passion and feeling and emotion. with this great rising phrase.